Newfeld with Budget and Financial Planning and the County Manager's Office. I'm here with Gail Kaufman and Joe Waters, and we'll get started here. We have Records and Taxation, Leadership and Support Services. So basically, we've got this building today, so for the most part. So you can see we're going to start with Records and Taxation, and
We are.
and then we'll get to Leadership and Support Services after that. So with that,
The first one is Appraiser. So, and the appraiser's budget is
Doing
going to,
appraiser, or are we
Wait a
doing
minute, where we
records?
at? Where we at?
What are we doing?
well,
appraiser's
appraiser
first.
is a subset of records and taxation includes appraiser, elections, and
Yeah.
TTV. So, the appraiser, their budget in '22 was 7.68, it's 8.01 in '23, and then their local tax support is 7.66 in '22 and 7.99 in '23. As you can see, nearly 100% of them are tax supported. Their FTEs go from 82.4 down to 81.4, and that's basically a correcting entry that reduced their FTE. And I will turn it over to Bo to go through his performance measures and his highlights.
Bo, welcome.
Chairman and Commissioners, thank you for your time. Let's see here if this will move to the next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Is he talking?
Okay. So under our performance measures, our scoreboard is soon up above. Financial stewardship, we're under budget last year. For customer satisfaction, we dropped a little bit on the calls. When we went to remote, we had some issues with our Jabber, with our staff until we all had actual laptops and/or Surface Pros. So they were having to log into their computer on their desk and then try to make phone calls. And so we had some technical issues with that. Finally got them worked out, so we dropped a little bit on our numbers for the calls. We actually were just short of the actual goal, which was 75%. We were at 72. So our miss was a little bit off, but better than the year before where we were at 68, which is the first year of COVID when we had a lot more problems. For the services and assessment procedures information, we are green. We've met all of our deadlines. We've completed all of our appeals, and we've processed everything, and we're ready to certify in the next couple of days for the 2022. But we met all of our qualifications from the Department of Revenue last year for 2021. We had a 94% rating from them out of 100. And anything over 80 or better is considered passing. So we're usually in the low 90s consistently. For operational effectiveness, I believe we were very effective in our appraisals. We were within the market with a 94% overall valuation based on the sales. And we also maximized our data and information. We were short 7 staff members for the last year, often on a different time frames, but the most of the time was 7. And that was a lot of times to do with, we lost some people due to the market. They left our place and took jobs making $5 or $8 an hour more than they were making here. And so that kept us a little bit under, but we were still able, with technology, to make up our differences and stay online for our deadlines. And then staff satisfaction, we're somewhat at a yellow because we just did a reorg. And of course, with the reorg comes a little bit of confusion and working through the communications on that reorg. We're now up and running with our reorg. And June 1, all the appraisal staff is now in their new regions going forward. So we're ready to go in that aspect. But I think we're a little bit of a yellow because of that. A reorg is always a struggle for anybody when you do that. So with that, I'd answer any questions you might have.
Bo, let me ask you, the appeals on residential and commercial, were they up, down, or about the same?
Commercial was up about 800 appeals. Residential was about the same as last year, which was about 1,000 less than normal. We ended up with 6,700 appeals. We usually are 7,000 plus to 8,000 on the norm. We had a 53% reduction on properties residentially speaking, which was about our normal average. And then for commercial, we were at 26%, and we usually run 22 to 23. So we weren't surprised with that because we still have areas in the commercial world where the market's still a little bit iffy as to whether or not it's stabilized from the COVID. So I thought we did really well on that aspect. It came out to about a 1.5%, Scott can correct me if I'm wrong, reduction in the overall assessment
Okay,
for the county.
Other questions? Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize, I'm still have a little bit of a sinus, so if I cough, I don't take it personally. Mr. Beauvais, it looks like you've reduced staff by one. Was that a direct relationship to the reorganization efforts? We had some conversation a number of months ago, and you had foreseen some possible staff efficiencies. Is this the same issue, or is this something else?
This one goes to our original one, 2 years ago, remember we had to do the reduction in our budgets. We had two positions that we put on the shelf and did not fill. Last year, we filled one of them. That other reduction is that one on the shelf, but at this point in time, I don't think we need to fill it. So we still have the 7 active ones we do need to fill on staff.
Okay, very good. Under staff satisfaction, employee engagement, do you foresee doing, and it's been called different things, but the employee engagement survey, do you see doing that sometime this year?
My goal is to do that, yes. Probably late summer, once we've gotten a month or two into the reorg and functioning to do that for our office. Because of the reorg, I think we have to kind of look at where we are in the process.
Fair enough. Madam County Manager, the engagement survey, is that something that is planned organization-wide, or will you be cherry-picking different departments to do it? I was just wondering what your strategy was.
It's planned organization-wide. Every other year, we do the employee engagement, which is planned for next year. And then off year, we do a modified version, but it's countywide. And this year, we're focusing more on diversity initiatives.
So, but the intent's the same to understand engagement and satisfaction of employees?
Yes, on the every other year one, we will have some of those questions on the in-between. So we may have to look at how we do these measures
So is this the
ongoing.
same thing he's talking about?
Well, it sounded like you may be doing one department-specific, but we do one organization-wide as
Okay,
well.
okay.
Correct. I think we just need to kind of do one because we've done a
No,
reorg
that's
and we're.
fair. The metric just wasn't clear because they're framed differently by different departments, and that's why I was just wondering. Thank you.
Other questions? Ms. O'Hara?
Yes, this is to the county manager. Can you repeat what you said on the diversity?
Yes, our focus this year on our asking questions of our employees are related to diversity questions. We do have a few engagement questions as well.
Okay, I would like a copy of those diversity questions, please.
Sure. We're working on them, and I don't know if it's finalized yet. We've been working with HR to get that out in the coming month or so.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Next.
Next, we have Elections Office.
And while Fred's coming up, I wanted to remind the board that we will be getting personal property and utility numbers June 15th. The schedule's a little different than it's been in the past. And so at that point, we will have updated ad valorem estimates.
Okay, so the election office, their budget in 2022 was 5.56 million, and it's dropped down to 4.95 in '23. And as I'm sure you are all aware, the election budget is cycles with the different type of elections that we have. The local tax support was 4.97 in '22 and 4.36 in '23. The FTEs are staying constant at 19. And with that, I'll turn it over to Fred for to go through the performance measures and then some highlights.
Mr. Sherman?
Okay, next slide, please. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So in terms of the scorecard, and you can see they're all blue, so we're kind of enacting a number of new performance measures. We've had the assistance of Molly Saunders, because Shockey Consulting come in, do some visioning, establishing our strategic plan for the election office, and are working through a number and implementing a number of the measurements. in terms of fiscal stability, customer satisfaction, obviously operations and employee engagement. Some of this is timing, and again, we've been very successful in terms of utilizing the great resources the commission provides election office and get timely results out on the election results, both in 2020 and 21. In terms of customer satisfaction, obviously the voters express their concerns and rate the election office through the Direction Finder, the Citizen Section Survey. Some of our other customers, which are almost employees too, is we will engage this year between maybe 1,500 to 1,800 people as election workers in various capacities. So they are as much of our customers. We could not operate elections without a lot of the volunteers, but they do receive stipend, paid through payroll, so they are, to a certain extent, employees as well. We do survey the election workers after each election we do and get some engagement of that. We have probably over 5,000 names in our database right now. In fact, we're going through almost like a PBS fundraiser. We're cold calling them all, trying to get engagement and workers on through it, so, and also update our database as well. Go to the next slide, and I'll hit on some highlights, which may be a little more relevant and germane to you all. So you can see the registered voters, and again, our registered voter numbers are a little cyclical, where they do kind of peak, particularly in presidential years and following federal election law guidelines. We do purge them on the 2 and 4 year cycles through those inactive voters, so you do see kind of an ebb and flow of registered voters. Voter turnout is going to be very interesting, particularly this year as well. Traditionally, the presidential election cycles are the greatest turnouts, and then the even year, 2 years after that, typically we don't see generally as high a turnout, but this year in particular, particularly this August election, is a wild card in terms of what we think the turnout's going to be. And you can kind of see a forecast there where we're showing almost the same kind of turnout percentage-wise in August as November. And in fact, if we hit that 65% turnout in August of 2022, that's going to equate to about 300,000 ballots cast, or 300,000 voters. And that is more than we did in November of 2016 presidential year. So we are anticipating a very, very large turnout for this next election coming up here in August. Satisfaction, community satisfaction, public survey, you can see we've had really good numbers and are steadily increasing to that standpoint. So again, just some tidbits of information. Next slide. So Johnson County voters do like to vote, and we do have a great investment. They tend to vote in person, and we are trending to do more advanced voting. Clearly, through the pandemic, presidential 2020 as well as 21 has been a little unique in terms of the mail ballot. We think it's going to come back to normal. 2020 was very much a unique year when the stay-at-home orders put into place, and going on early into 2020, we didn't even know if we could have polling sites and kind of work through that cycle. So we've seen trends coming back to mail ballot elections going to come back more to the normal time frames. But we are growing overall, and we're seeing more and more people vote in advance and in person. Even in 2020, we saw more than 50% of the people vote in person, even though we were in a once-in-a-century pandemic. Again, election results have been timely, and we've been going out. The goal is by 9 p.m., and we've been able to meet that aspect of them. Probably the biggest thing for this coming year as well, and you can see it here in the slide, is we are embracing advanced voting and reflecting that, because in 2022, we're going to have 16 advanced voting sites. They'll come out in 2 ways. We'll have 9 sites. We had 8 last year in 2021. The additional one for 2+ weeks over 3 Saturdays. The library has agreed to let us use the former Lackman Road Library site there at 87th and Lackman. And then the next week, we'll have a 1+ week over 2 Saturdays, have additional 7 sites, including Westwood City Hall, Shawnee City Hall, Leawood City Hall, Oak Park Library, Johnson County Community Colleges is letting us be on their site, Lathrop Fire Admin, and I believe Tomahawk Creek Community Center. So we are embracing advanced voting here in Johnson County, and the voters have done that as well. And again, mail ballots are probably returning back to that levels we've seen previously, like in 2016, 2018, where it's generally between about 45 to 50,000 mail ballots, where in 2020 presidential, we did over 150,000. Next slide, we have 2 kind of capital improvement proposals, a request on there. One of them is an upgrade, and the time has come to look at our election management system. We use that system to basically manage our election workers, schedule our polling sites, all of our equipment. One facet we will look at is basically upgrading our campaign finance filing system. What we have now is a very vintage, almost 20-year-old in-house system, so we need to look at that. And the second item would be ballot on demand. One thing we're working towards, and it will take some additional review and actually eventually chairman sign off as well as sign off of the SOS office, is to go to vote centers in 2023. So we're going to that aspect of them, but the ballot on demand printers would be needed to implement that, where any of the voting sites, if we go to vote centers, would have the ability to print a paper ballot. This particular August, we're going to have close to 2,000 different ballot styles, and we're not going to be able to pre-print and sort many ballots at every polling site. So the ballot on demand would be needed if and when we go to a vote center model. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Mr. Sherman, this is an election year. I completely understand that. And the Secretary of State's office is up for election or re-election. And so there's a lot of information that gets distributed. And would you, there's a lot of chatter, a lot of Facebook posts, a lot of campaign materials I've seen that speaks of election integrity. Can you give us a brief review of the process that's used in Johnson County? And I would say this, the Board of County Commissioners sits as the Board of Canvassers, and whether past or current, I don't recall a commissioner ever voting against certifying the election. Is that right?
I can't speak to the history of all canvasses. I've only been in the election office really for a little over 2 years, but I think there's been a very consistent approach to reviewing the elections.
I could be corrected, but I don't recall any commissioner voting not to certify the election. So, can you give us a brief summary?
Sure. So basically, Johnson County follows the state of Kansas model, and the kind of the format or structure of voting here in Kansas has really been in place for a little over 25 years, since about 1995 or 1996 or so. Kansas voters can vote any one of three ways. You can vote in person on election day. You can vote in person at an advanced voting site, and that can begin up to 20 days prior to the election, or you can vote by mail. And Kansas is considered kind of a no excuse by mail, but you do have to make an application to vote by mail for each election cycle. Kansas is also a photo ID state, so whether you vote in person or you vote by mail, you have to provide identification, and by mail we go through a signature process for both for the application as well as the return envelope. So the system's been in place in Kansas for a good quarter of a century. If you look at some of the debates out there and some of the suggestions of how to secure or increase election security, the Kansas model, for the most part, follows all those high-level scoring cards in terms of have been implemented and been in place for a number of years.
Okay, well, I would simply say there's some of the questions that I've had. You go in and you vote on an electronic machine, you get a printout of your vote, and you've got an ability to check that printout to make sure that it properly reflects your choices. Then it goes to a counter, electronic counter, and goes through the electronic counter, and then that ballot is preserved so that if there needs to be future checks, that can occur. Is that right?
That is correct. We're a voter-verified paper audit county. Everybody who votes in Johnson County, whether you vote in person, use the touchscreen machines, even if you vote in person, you can use a traditional paper ballot or vote by mail. We have one paper ballot for every vote that's cast. We are confident that every voter who checks in is a qualified registered voter. If they're not, they're put through the provisional process, and we count for every voter and count for every ballot and every ballot we have on file.
Okay. If I go into to vote in person and I present my ID and my name is not reflected as being a registered voter, I get to vote anyway, a provisional ballot. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So that provisional ballot then is checked with our voter registration list, and to make sure that either I'm registered or that I'm not registered. And if it's determined that I am registered, then that ballot is counted.
So all provisional ballots are presented to the Canvass Board with recommendations of ones to be counted and ones not to be counted. The Canvass Board is the body that takes a recommendation on it. But yes, that provisional process is as much of a safety net. We service the voter. We give them an opportunity to vote. And that provisional process gives us a time to research the situation for the particular voter. There may have been an error put into their voter registration. For example, if they showed up without a photo ID, they can still vote and produce that ID at a later point in time. Currently, we still are a precinct voting situation or model on election day, so if they go to the wrong polling site, we still service the voter. The provisional process, again, gives us some opportunities to kind of rectify and correct that aspect. So again, the provisional process has been in place in the state of Kansas for a number of time, and Johnson County follows the state of Kansas procedures.
Okay, let me go to the mail ballot, which seems to be, an issue, the drop box, et cetera. And each mail ballot, which, whether it comes in from the drop box or is delivered by the postman or is delivered in person, that mail ballot is thoroughly checked. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And again, as I indicated prior, in Kansas, every mail ballot is based off of an application. So that application is also verified with the identification of the voter and the signature of that voter. That's even to receive the ballot. The mail ballots go out specifically to the voter. The voter takes their ballot, they mark it in privacy, they seal it into a specific return envelope that comes back to the election office, and that return envelope is where we verify the signature and identification of them. It's one voter per ballot that comes through the mail ballot system.
Okay. Well, it just seems to me that some of the information that's distributed may be applicable to some other state in the union, but is not what's reflected in our voting process in Johnson County or in the state of Kansas. Is that correct?
I'm very aware of the Kansas situation. I can't tell you about the other 49 states in great detail,
Okay,
but yes,
thank you.
there are a lot of variations.
All right. Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sherman, you may or may not recall, but last year I pinged you about your metrics, and you had indicated that you were going to initiate a process and improve those for this year, and I will tell you that you did and you have. I think it's definitely a step up, and I appreciate that. I know there are new metrics, but not just the format, but the substance, I think, are in the right direction. I'm particularly interested in the one metric where your target budget is 98%. And that's an interesting concept, not just 100%, but actually to demonstrate some kind of savings. So I will keep that thought in mind as we go forward, and I may quiz the county manager about that related to other departments. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Ms. Fast?
Yes, 19 full-time FTEs, and you have like several hundred how many voting locations?
So this year, in 2022, I said we're going to go with 16 advanced voting sites. On Election Day, I believe the number is going to be 145.
With 19 full-time FTEs, it's just incredible.
So again, we have a lot of folks that work for us on a seasonal or part-time basis. The traditional election workers obviously help us on Election Day. It is going to be a good challenge, and we're going to need a lot of people to help us out on advanced voting. So a lot of Saturday opportunities, even though that's the shortest number of hours. Typically, we're open only from 9 to 3 or 6 hours a time. Those tend to be our highest voter per hour days on those Saturdays. So we'll have a good exposure over 3 Saturdays, both for the August primary and the November general election. But again, it's going to take a lot of folks to help us. And it's not just the traditional election workers. We have special board workers helping us through the application and processing the mail ballots. We have a number of folks working in the warehouse, preparing the supplies, checking the machines. We do a logic and accuracy testing prior to every election where we have a predetermined election. And every piece of equipment we utilize per election, we go through kind of a testing process, and we tabulate that to make sure that they're all calibrated correctly, that the end results match our predetermined election going into it. So, and again, it takes probably, this year, we're going to have 1,500 to 1,800 individuals in addition to the 19 full-time staff assisting us in various capacities through the election processes.
Can you talk about the vote anywhere? So does that, you're working towards that in 2023. Does that mean like I can go to any precinct, just like I can go to any advanced ballot location? I mean, how will that work?
So that is correct. The legislation was put into place, I believe, 3 or 4 years ago, The standards were adopted about 2 years ago, and the first time it can be implemented is in a odd number year. 2023 would be the first time that any county in the state of Kansas can do so. So we're incrementally taking steps towards that. And again, by increasing the number of advanced voting sites, gives us a little bit of a trend line and actually be able to track some data. It would be very similar to advanced voting. On Election Day currently, and in 2022, we are precinct-based. So on Election Day only, we assign specific neighborhoods or voting precincts to a particular voting site. When we go through a vote center model, and it will take sign-off by the county chairman, whether it's this chairman or the next chairman, as well as the Secretary of State's office, we have to
I'm
develop
not gone yet. Thank you.
And the question is whether with timing we turn it in, it's basically at the end of January, so it's going to be right at that transition timeframe of when we present the plan. But it is a very detailed plan that we have to present on each voting site, but it would allow a voter to go any polling site on Election Day. And that sounds very simple, particularly from the consumer standpoint, but from the back end, the planning standpoint, when we open up 150 sites, it's going to be very challenging for us to know where voters are going to go on that Election Day. Because currently, we can tie it down and we know specifically of the 600 voters going to a particular voting site that we assign, we can get pretty accurate forecasts. But when we open it up county-wide, it's going to be an interesting challenge. So we are working towards that aspect of it. There still needs to be plans and presentations and ultimate approvals made before we go to that model, if we do in
Still have all
2023.
those, like, I could still have, you'll still have all those precinct voting centers, or you would reduce those precinct centers?
Naturally, we have gone down in polling sites just through attrition. Back in the day, we used to have over 300 Election Day polling sites, and they're very difficult to do. Even in this year, of the 150, we're in 91 church facilities on Election Day. Like the ballot on demand computer process is for us to be able to have basically a digital supply to print out any one of the 2,000 ballot styles at any site. So naturally, we basically are having maybe 5 to 10, maybe 15 less of election sites on Election Day in a given year. It's almost like going from a neighborhood hardware store model to more of a Home Depot or Lowe's model, to where we'll have maybe fewer but larger, more efficient voting centers. So we'll be doing a little bit like Election Day. Now, there is a great segment of the population that adamantly only votes on Election Day, and that's great. I mean, we were still projecting this year to probably service 100,000 voters on Election Day here in August and November. And then we're going to take more than just fixing sites to do that on Election Day. So we will strive to basically replicate the election model we're doing today in 2022 as a vote center site in 2023, if we get there and get approvals and sign-offs.
Ms. Allenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sherman, for all your hard work. And I appreciate the chair bringing up some of the questions that I get. Could you also visit the drop boxes and how those ballots are picked up from the drop boxes?
So as the chairman kind of noted, the vote by mail, a voter can return their filled out ballot in their sealed envelope any one of a couple ways. They can put a stamp on it and return it through the U.S. postal system. They can take it to any voting site, any advanced voting site or their Election Day voting site. Or in November or actually October of 2020, we deployed 7 additional drop boxes throughout the county. And we've always had a drop box facility of some kind at the election office. Typically, it was in the building. In 2018, I believe, we put through those drive-through lanes. So we have 8 drop-off sites that are kind of staffed and maintained by the election office. Those particular drop-off boxes, we deploy a bipartisan team of 2 that go out daily and collect the mail ballots that's put into those drop boxes and bring them back. We count those, record that number. Those are processed just like any of the other mail ballots. We go through verification, identification process, and they're all based on an application that was received to get that mail ballot. The U.S. postal system, there's probably over 200 drop boxes here in the Johnson County area, in addition to taking them into the post office. And again, we'll have 16 advanced voting sites and about 145 polling sites on Election Day, and a voter can bring in their ballot to those polling sites and deposit it there. It doesn't have to be their specific polling site. So those are the ways that they come back. The 8 drop boxes that the election office maintain, again, we have a bipartisan team of 2, a checks and balances system. They are under 24/7 camera surveillance.
Thank you.
Ms. Hansley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your report and your hard work, Mr. Sherman. We're very fortunate to have you. I have a question. I'm not sure if you're the right person to ask, but a few months ago, it came to our attention that the Sheriff's Department was investigating alleged election fraud. I'm wondering, to your knowledge, have there been any findings from that inquiry?
I think your first statement was correct. I'm not the one to ask that, answer that question. We've cooperated in every way we've been asked to in working with the Sheriff's Office.
Okay, well, I'll save that for the Sheriff's budget discussion then. Thank you.
To answer that question, I don't think there's been any report submitted.
Not that I'm aware of.
And I checked with the district attorney's office and had the same response. So, okay, other questions? Ms. O'Hara?
Okay, I understand that the documents that the bipartisan team, they pick up, and that they're supposed to sign off, that there's supposed to be 4 signatures, and that in the past, there's been some issues with that. Are we tightening that up so that we have all 4 of them sign off, so we have that certainty on chain of custody?
So yes, we are tightening it up, and the documents, the chain of custody documents will be completed correctly. They won't necessarily have 4 signatures on them. The original versions that came out had that aspect of them. We changed some internal processes where they're received by the special board, but we are getting some commonality and standard operating procedures basically in all the 4 big counties in the state of Kansas.
Okay, so how many signatures will we require?
It will have 2 of the bipartisan team and then a signature from a special election board who's sworn in that receives them.
Okay, and then you talk about the video cameras on the drop boxes. Are those monitored?
The Sheriff's Office staff is the entity that houses and maintains all the video cameras for virtually all the county systems.
I have spoken to the sheriff, and he assures me that that is not their responsibility and that they are not monitoring those video cameras. And also, I have requested the video of the 2 that have existing files, the one at the election office and the one at the Northeast office building, and I was denied those videos. And I did it under a core request. And so how are we going to tighten this up so that if we have video cameras, well, we do have video cameras on these drop boxes, and the ones at the libraries, I understand that that those videos are not saved. So are we going to tighten up on that, and those videos are going to be saved? Are we going to allow the public to see how this is being monitored? Or, I mean, because those drop boxes are not being monitored.
So the videos is really to enhance the security of the drop boxes. They're not there to monitor and have oversight of voters. If there is information or someone has directions about there being a crime or damage or information aspect of it, it needs to be reported to law enforcement, and law enforcement will do the appropriate investigation of the situation. They're not put into place to monitor voters or to do checks of that aspect of them. We have existing checks and balances in place already for all mail ballots, whether they get put in the drop boxes, returned by the U.S. Postal System, or returned in person by the voter. But the securities are only to supplement the security and oversight of those drop boxes. And if there's any suspicion or alleged crimes, that needs to be reported to law enforcement, and law enforcement will do the investigation.
Okay, so the video cameras are not being monitored, and the public has no right to see any of these videos after the fact. They're not available. And are the libraries going to maintain a copy of the videos for a certain period of time?
I think that probably requires a response from the legal department, quite frankly. And have you had communication with the legal department in regards to those items?
Yes, I have.
And the response has been?
I was denied access to the videotapes that still exist.
Okay.
The other thing is that on the signatures, on comparing the signatures, if people are doing their, I'm sorry, I'm having a little problem with my head. I think I have a migraine coming on, so bear with me. The people that sign up to vote at the Driver's License Bureau, that those are electronic signatures that you are comparing on these mail-in ballots or Dropbox ballots. Is that correct?
So virtually every document that is signed is submitted to the election office, and we scan to the voter's record. So that includes the application, which requires a wet signature for the mail ballot application, the return envelopes of the mail ballots that come back, which again are wet signatures. Some of the voter registration processes are done through the DMV or the Motor Voter Act, which are electronic signatures.
Right. So our baseline, our baseline is an electronic signature.
Not in all cases.
Not
Again,
in all
we-
cases, but in whatever percentage, 20%, 10%, whatever. So we are comparing electronic signatures then with just normal signatures that is by hand. And so, I mean, I'm just concerned, and I know that this is state law, but it just seems like that perhaps to tighten up security, that we would require an actual signature and not an electronic signature, because I know electronic signatures are notoriously difficult to decipher.
And again, every mail ballot application requires an application on a paper application, which has a wet signature.
But if they
You have that paper wet signature as an additional basis to verify the return signature on the return envelope.
Okay, but the baseline could be an electronic signature.
Again, the review board and the people that will have a number of signature processes or variations to look at. People's signatures do change as they go through their life cycle. And the characteristics are looked at. If it is any discrepancy, it's challenged. It goes through some additional review processes. If it cannot be resolved, it's made provisional. So there are a number of standard operating procedures and criteria in place to verify the signatures.
And on the drop boxes, those were in response to COVID. That was in 2020. Those drop boxes were in response to COVID, correct?
The 7 additional drop boxes were provided by the Secretary of State office and the governor's office. They were used some federal COVID funds to provide that component of them. As you may recall, there was a lot of scrutiny at that time going into the presidential election of 2020 over the U.S. Postal Service's systems and in regard to the aspect of them. That particular election in November 2020, we saw the vast majority, probably in the 70% aspect, returned mail ballots through those drop boxes. Since then, it's been a little more equal. In fact, we're seeing some of the smaller elections more coming by the U.S. Postal System, so it's kind of gravitating back to the previous trends without the drop.
Okay, and then one final question. Johnson County took $856,000 from I've just heard them called Zuckerbucks. So, and so what was that money? So this is a non-governmental organization that we accepted this money, and this was in the fall of 2020.
Correct.
And so what were those dollars, what were they used for? And why would we be accepting NGOs' money for an election?
So that grant was done, and there's a couple of sources out there. I believe October 8th of 2020 was the action item by the county commission to approve the application for those votes, so that October 8th, 2020 is the minutes that reflects that action. There was a Kansas Legislative Post-Audit Division audit that was done for every county that took those grants and kind of summarized that component of them. Actually, and again, Johnson County, we used them for a number of things. We actually supplemented some election worker pay during COVID for that component of them. We rented 2 additional advanced voting sites. We paid for the space at Oak Park Mall as well as the Overland Park Convention Center. We did some mailing components for mail ballots in terms of the applications that went out to that component of them. We bought the cage carts, which our election workers love. How we deploy the supplies to the polling sites is another component of them. So there is a full listing that we provided and can be provided to you and is highlighted in that post-election audit. And we actually did return some funds because we did not use the full amount.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to know how much you returned. So if you can just send that to me.
Be glad to.
Thank you.
Okay.
If I could add one thing to that list or that description relative to the grant, the briefing sheet had a breakdown of what the parts and pieces of our application were going to cover, and the estimated cost, and then it also had the agreement that reflected that same list. So.
Fred, I want to ask you one last question on my part. When the post office delivers mail ballots that have come to them either by their drop boxes or, in the facility itself, do they sign a document?
No, there's no chain of custody and no videos on those.
Thank you. Other questions? Ms. Hanslick.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the discussion about the signatures, because I didn't hear you mention this, but in my experience, you follow up with everyone whose signature does not match and give them the opportunity to come in and correct that. Is that correct?
That is correct. So if it is challenged the review process, it becomes provisional, and actually we're required under state law to contact the voter. I think actually the new law goes into place and we're required to contact them 3 times is the new law, but we do give them an opportunity to cure their ballot, to come in, show their identification, sign it in front of us, to give us an opportunity to verify that signature if it is challenged to that review process. That is correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have one.
Ms. O'Hara.
Okay, so if there's any tampering with the U.S. mail, that is an extremely serious offense, correct? I mean, this is a,
What was the question?
there is a
I'll
difference.
defer to my attorney to answer that question.
Okay. But it's a federal offense to tamper with the mail system. And so, I mean, you're talking about you're talking about apples and oranges as far as drop boxes and the mail. So people perhaps would be less likely to tamper with the U.S. mail. So that's just an observation. Thank you.
As I recall, there are no cameras on the drop boxes at the post office, is there?
Yeah, there's no cameras on my,
Okay,
on
thank you very
anything of
much.
the-
Are there any other questions in regards to the budget? All right, thank you, Fred.
Thank you all very much.
Continue, please.
So now we have Treasury, Taxation, and Vehicles.
I know.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. Treasury, Taxation, and Vehicles, the FTEs decreased by 2.0. This is due to those 2 FTEs moving to Financial Management and Administration Department. The expenses increased slightly, thank you, which is a combination of those FTEs moving and the net impact of salary and budget benefits. And then the tax support decreases very slightly due to those reasons and revenue increases primarily in motor vehicle. I'll turn it over to Tom now to discuss performance measures.
Thank you, Ted. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Tom Franzen, Treasury, Taxation, and Vehicles again. Real quick, I'm going to take a few moments to run through the performance measures as Ted had mentioned, then I will get to our final slide, which has the key points, accomplishments, and challenges. First, under the financial stability objective, our scorecard shows our goal of strengthening our financial position that we have green and a red KPI. The fees for service vehicles KPI is red, since we still have to rely on general fund support for the motor vehicle operation. And I will talk a little bit more about that in the challenges section on the next slide. The ad valorem tax collection rate, KPI is green. Our collection rate remains high, and I'll also talk about that a little more under the accomplishments section. I would like to mention the next KPI listed in this area is the fees for services for land records, taxation, and this is currently listed as a data-only element and has no target. In previous years, the board has wanted to see this data to understand the amount of revenue collections by our Register of Deeds operation. The Budget Office and Financial Management Administration both track Register of Deeds revenue as a major revenue source, and therefore I'm recommending we drop it from our dashboard as it's not really something that we manage to. Moving on to the next item, under the customer satisfaction objective, we have one strategic goal here, which is our improved customer satisfaction KPI. And the KPI for this goal is our score on the community survey for the motor vehicle operation and is currently showing as red. I will note that we did set this target at 89%, which is the level of the survey results when we initially set the KPI in 2018. We did not measure this in 2021, so we are using the 2020 data point of 82.8%. I will also point out to the board that in the latest survey earlier this year, we received a score of 86% favorable, and we show that data point in the 2022 target column. Also, on the positive side, we've been trending up over the past 2 surveys on customer satisfaction and approaching our target. Under the operational effectiveness objective, we list 3 goals. Uphold resource stewardship goal has 3 KPIs, all of which are green. The active investment effectiveness, in that area, we exceeded our projected rate of return of 17 basis points in our investments, and we also exceeded the targets for both the property tax collections payment automation and the motor vehicle registration payment automation, both of which I will talk about under the key points section on the next slide. The increased operational effectiveness goal, we exceeded our goal of accuracy of document indexing. We fell slightly below our goal of accuracy in parcel processing and was lower than we wanted in the title processing accuracy, which is why this is yellow on the scorecard. Regarding the title processing accuracy KPI, I'm confident that this number is going to trend back up as our new employees that we've hired over the past 2 years get more comfortable with processing titles in a motor vehicle operation. Under the increased service delivery goal, the one KPI we have for this goal is for the wait times for our vehicles operation. This oval currently shows as white, as this is a data-only element without a target set for it. I am recommending that we're going to go ahead and change that going forward to have a target. Prior to the pandemic, we were experiencing wait times between 40 and 60 minutes on average. As you can see in the 2020 and again in 2021, those wait times increased significantly. This increase can be attributed to the delays we discussed previously in processing transactions due to the social distancing requirements that we put in at the time, which limited our capacity to serve our customers, as well as the amount of staff vacancies and turnover we experienced over that 2-year period. Lastly, on the employee engagement objective of improving staff satisfaction, that remains below the target with the 2020 data, since we did not survey for the engagement in 2021. And as I mentioned to you last year when we discussed this, this is a focus area for the new department going forward, and we're looking forward to the upcoming survey on engagement later this year. Turning to the next slide, under the key points, there are a couple of items I want to talk about. First is our property tax payments, and in this area, our high automation rate continues. If you look at the past 10 years of data, the trend continues of increasing payment automation. The online payments have consistently grown to now represent 11% of our payments. Mailed-in payments have decreased from 36% to 28%. The escrow and mortgage payment services that we receive have remained stable at 56% of total volume. And the in-person and reject payments that are processed manually by our staff have declined on most notably 36% in the last 5 years to 5% of the overall payments. This is an operational effectiveness KPI that shows a shift from our in-person labor-intensive processing to the automated systems processing. The second item on there is the motor vehicle registration renewal payments, and here again, our high automation rate continues. Similar positive trends we're experiencing on the motor vehicle payment automation side are now 91% of payments processed efficiently, with a continuing shift away from in-person payments. In 2016, we had 21% that were in person. We're down to 9% in 2021. And as you might imagine, that was highlighted by roughly 50% reduction from 2019 to 2020 due to the pandemic. We went from 15% down to 8%. Of note, the credit card online payments continue to increase. They're now up to 50% of our total transaction volume for 2021. And this KPI is important because it shows as the community and as our transactions continue to grow, we limit the growth of the staff by limiting or reducing in-person transactions. The third key point is the motor vehicle service wait times, and I'm happy to report that they're declining. If you recall, last year I reported that the wait times had been significantly impacted by COVID and our corresponding capacity limitations. Our motor vehicle operations have returned to a more normal status based on the early data we have received for 2022. And as I mentioned previously regarding the spike in wait times in 2020 and 2021, as indicated on that dashboard, we're dealing with a number of challenges that drove up the wait times. The data for 2022 shows wait times averaging 47 minutes so far. This falls within our pre-pandemic range of roughly 40 to 60 minutes of average wait times. And as we continue in 2022, I expect that to hold. And the last item, the last key point we have is our e-recording business, and the positive trend continues for our customers electronically recording their documents. We're currently electronically recording 81% of our documents, with another 15% received through the mail, and the final 4% being recorded in person. We've recorded over 140,000 documents each of the past 2 years, which is the highest amount of documents we've recorded over the last 10 years. A key driver for this high volume was the Federal Reserve reducing interest rates by 150 basis points at the beginning of the pandemic, and that drove an increase in mortgage refinancings. Under the accomplishments section, there's 3 things I've noted for the board. First is property tax collections continue to remain high with less than 1% delinquency rate. And as I've mentioned to the board previously, the staff does a wonderful job collecting over $1.4 billion, and we do it with 8 staff. Our high collection rate is also a testament, as I've mentioned before, to our community and its ability to pay its taxes. We're very grateful for that, and obviously we're very grateful they do it in a very efficient manner for us. That keeps costs down. The next item I wanted to briefly mention is our department leadership changes. And if you recall, I talked last year about some of the things that we are taking a look at, and then earlier this year we made some changes in the leadership structure, and I wanted to go ahead and highlight some of those for you here. First, I have 2 individuals with me here in the room today, and Amy Meekerberg was appointed earlier this year to the roles of County Clerk and Register of Deeds. Along with that appointment, I appointed Greg Baldwin as the Chief Deputy Treasurer for the county, which adds the motor vehicle operations to his oversight role for the other things he manages as well. In addition to these 2 staff here, I have 3 other staff that I'd like to recognize that are not with us today. They're downstairs working, but they have taken on new roles with the department as well. And that would be Summer Hassan, who is now our Deputy County Clerk, Paul Knoll, who is now our Deputy Register of Deeds, and Joe Gilbert, who is now our Deputy Treasurer. The third accomplishment that I'd like to note is working on improving our county's web presence. And as you're going to hear from, I believe, others here this afternoon, we did a lot of work leading up to November's implementation last year of our new website. As part of that work, Treasury, Taxation, and Vehicle staff helped to build the portions of the website that offer our services. We've added some new search functionality to allow our customers to be able to easily find the services we provide by putting in searches for County Clerk, County Treasurer, or Register of Deeds. That'll quickly get them to the services that we offer. In addition to that, we've added the motor vehicle guide that was talked about earlier today. That is prominent. It's the first guide that's offered, and it's high on the front page of the website. We're excited about that. Motor vehicle operation, as you might recall, continues to drive a high amount of the traffic to the website, and we're finding that our customers are able to more quickly find that information and get served. So the last section here is the challenges, and I want to talk about a couple, 3 things we have here. And the first is Senate Bill 13 and its impact. Ah, yes, the legislation that continues to give keeps on giving. As you recall, last year I walked through the primary impacts of Senate Bill 13, and just a quick reminder for everyone what that piece of legislation did. It significantly impacted the county clerk operations across the state. It added a revenue-neutral rate calculation. It established an additional separate public hearing for exceeding that revenue-neutral rate. It extended the timeline for budgetary information to be submitted to county clerks. It reduced the final levy calculation timeframe for county clerks to deliver the tax rolls to the county treasurers. And new for this year, it is now requiring us to do an estimated tax notification and send those out before the public hearings for each of the jurisdictions that are raising the revenue neutral rates. I will be providing more information at a meeting in June under the manager's memo that's going to give you more details, but I wanted to let you know that is one of our challenges We've been spending time, from a staff perspective, programming the system, testing the system, making sure the documentation is accurate based on what the law is required. And the law requires a lot of information to be posted on this notification. So staff's diligently working to get that done, and I'm confident we'll hit that goal. The next challenge listed concerns employee retentions, and specifically the motor vehicle employees. And as I mentioned last year, one of our challenges was turnover and staffing on our motor vehicle operations. We've had 42 new hires in the motor vehicle operation over the past 2 years. Just want to stop and think about that. We have roughly 51 people on the front lines, and we've had 42 new hires in the last 2 years. While hiring is definitely a challenge and a concern in this market, our concern right now, our bigger concern, is retaining those employees that we have just hired. You can imagine in this labor market, they're seeing opportunities elsewhere. We're investing in them, and we want to retain them. So we're excited about what the county manager has proposed in her budget. There are some tools in there that might help us with retention, but that is one of our challenges right now, is making sure the people that we have got in here, we're able to retain them. And the final challenge that I wanted to provide an update on is our latest efforts to get the motor vehicle fee legislation passed. We continue to work with other county treasurers this past session to get the bill passed. We were successful in getting the bill out of the House. It passed 114 to 6. We were excited about that. It got through the way we wanted to, and it was amended, so it actually made our bill even better in my mind. It increased local revenues, so treasurers can provide the services that the state requires. It also reduced a fee, the DMV modernization fee, which net made it cheaper for our customers. The House saw that, they passed it. They thought it was good legislation. It goes over to the Senate side, it gets passed out of the Ways and Means Committee, and it gets stalled by Senate leadership. We were hopeful, and it was still on the slide as something that was out there, but with the legislature adjourning on Monday, they did not take any action on it. So we have to go back, and we're going to be talking over the summer months what our strategies are to go ahead and do something with this bill. We're obviously disappointed, but at the end of the day, we're excited about the fact that we got it so far and we got it right to the finish line. So we're hopeful that with maybe a little more work over the summer months, we can help explain the bill to Senate leadership and get them comfortable with it and move it forward. And I wanted to remind the board why it's important. And you've heard me say this over the years. And the board is very helpful for our motor vehicle operation and for our community by providing general fund support. And we provide anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million each year, depending on the year, depending on the expenses we have. But that's money from the general fund that is supporting a state function that we operate locally. So that's why we're trying so hard to get that bill passed. It's the right thing to do. We believe we can get it done. We just need to keep trying. And with that, Mr. Chairman, those are my prepared remarks.
Well, Mr. Franson, thank you for that very thorough report. I do want to go to Senate Bill 13 very briefly. Do you have an idea what that cost is going to be? And secondly, the county is not the only taxing district. Schools, cities, community college. What if those entities make a mistake? Are we responsible for refunding, or does that fall upon the city or school district, or how does that work?
So you asked a number of questions, Mr. Chairman. Let me try and address those. So the first thing, the cost of that operation, we have estimated it to be around $100,000 to mail, based on our anticipation that most, if not all, jurisdictions in Johnson County will exceed revenue neutral rates. So knowing that, we're going to go ahead and send out all the information to the property owners so they have the information about what the revenue neutral rate is, what the tax levies were and what they will be, and the budgets associated with that, and they'll be able to see the difference calculated based on where the budgets are before the councils and commissions take final action. So that's their information they're getting, we will be getting out to the customers, so then they can, if they would like, to engage with those jurisdictions to come to their public hearings. So that's the theory behind it. The cost, as I mentioned, we expect to be $100,000, but for the first 2 years, this year and next year, it's to be covered by the state of Kansas. They have set up a fund and they have money for that. After that, it'll be at the local level and it'll be allocated based on a formula about who's raising taxes and how much, but that's down the road. For right now, the state's covering that piece. To your other question, I believe, was about what if somebody makes a mistake and there's refunds. We will not let them make a mistake, because if they don't do it right,
Be careful, be careful.
the county clerk was given authority under this latest legislative session to go ahead and stop it from becoming a tax bill that needs to be refunded. So knowing that, we are comfortable that it won't get to the point where we're going to misbill the community, but there will be a conversation with the jurisdictions if they didn't follow the law, why they won't be able to get more than the revenue neutral rate.
I understand that there'll be every effort made to communicate with jurisdictions.
Yes, sir, and
But
we're gonna
they
communicate.
sometimes have their own ideas. Let me ask you this last question. Is there a minimum that does not need to be refunded? For instance, if there's an error that is $1.50, do we have to send a check? Somebody have to send a check for $1.50, or?
So that's actually a question that gets into our billing practices. If I go back to if revenue is being generated more than last year, that's the issue that we're talking about.
Well, I understand, but if there's a mistake that reflects we all need a $1.50 reimbursement, do we have to send a check to everybody for $1.50?
The legislation doesn't address the specifics around that. We have some local procedures that deal with whether or not we refund dollars under a certain dollar amount, and that's actually very specific. It's not across the board. It's, I believe, real estate, if I remember correctly, and it's a $5, but that's a Johnson County thing. That is not a state of Kansas thing.
Well, my opinion is this is another example of legislation and those who initiate it don't understand the financial impact on local taxpayers that these requirements bring about. So just my editorial.
Yes, sir.
Questions, Ms. Fast?
Yes, when do you think these letters will go out? And how many taxing, another point the chairman says, Russell County taxing jurisdictions in Johnson County. I mean, okay, so when will they go out, and how many taxing jurisdictions do we have? Don't we have like 300 or something?
So, two questions. The first was when they go out, and as with all things with this piece of legislation, it's very prescriptive. It says by when, and we have to, within 10 days of a public hearing, provide it. And based on the way the calendar shapes up, we have to have those out by early August. So we intend to meet that date, and we will. The question you have about how many, yes, we are different than 104 other counties in the state of Kansas. We have 190+ thousand parcels that we mail to. So we will be sending a lot of notices out, presuming that everyone is exceeding the revenue neutral rates.
Ms. Allenbrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it appropriate this time to ask a couple of items that are on here that are not funded, what that equipment's for?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So could you explain what those two pieces of equipment?
I apologize, I'm not.
Did I look at the wrong thing?
Yeah, I don't think.
Never mind.
I'm happy to submit a request for additional resources.
Oh, that's
at this
okay,
point
that's
if I
okay.
need to.
All right. Other question, Mr. Ashcraft?
Tom said it's really not needed, so don't worry about it. No, Mr. Franzen, thank you for your presentation. I have some questions that we can deal with offline because I was looking at this year's metrics for satisfaction, customer satisfaction compared to last year, and I was having a hard time tracking it. But you made the point that there, in your scorecard, that the satisfaction levels, customer satisfaction levels are a challenge, and also staff satisfactions are a challenge. And I was wondering, do you have specific elements in this year's budget request to deal with those two satisfaction challenges, both customers directly and employees? I didn't capture that. And an adjunct question is related to the measure you're using for community satisfaction, customer satisfaction. Have you ever considered point of service measures rather than community global measures to better assess how well you're doing operationally?
Yes, and Commissioner Ashcraft, thank you for those comments, and I'm happy to meet with you offline and talk about specifics year over year with our dashboard. Specifically, your question around do I need additional resources to do specific things in the areas of focusing on our customer satisfaction and our employee satisfaction? And the answer to that is no. Within our current budgetary resources, we will go ahead and address those. As I mentioned, we are looking forward to the upcoming survey that's going to have some elements of employee engagement, and we're going to work on building off of that in our new department. The community survey, you hit on a great point. That provides us a high-level data point, but it doesn't give us a lot of specificity around what we're doing well and what we're not. And I've asked staff to begin thinking about, and as I had mentioned to the board previously, begin looking at ways to do point-of-service surveying so we can at least get quick, in-the-moment feedback. So we're beginning those conversations. My hope is to have that pulled together later this year and rolled out by next year. And with that, we'll be able to then tailor our business need, our services a little better to what the community is looking for. But obviously, the information we received through the community survey is very positive. With this latest results, it's 86% favorable.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Franzen.
Thank you.
We'll
Chairman,
take a 5-minute break. I'm ahead of you.
before that, though, I do need to make a note for the record that Commissioner O'Hara left at 2:36 PM from this meeting. Thank
Okay,
you.
So noted, thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break. We've got about 5 or 6 other agencies to hear from. So the hour is
Midnight.
3 PM, almost. So let's be cognizant of the time. Thank you. reconvene from recess, and next,
So we're going to move on to leadership and support services. I think Scott's going to start off. I failed to say first thing when we started. I hope you've all seen in front of you, I set out the revisit list for this week. Yes. And once again, if we could get them back at the end of the session, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks, Gail. Scott Newfield again. This first one is a pie chart to just show the distribution of expenditures in this area. The countywide budget is by far the largest, almost half at $103 million. There's a whole listing in your budget book in the detail on countywide. It's got a whole page and it's got a listing of what's in there. I would remind the board that in 2022 and 2023, that's where we budgeted expenditure authority for coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. So 60 million of that 103 are those funds. There's some other significant things in there as well. That's where we levy for transit and it's transferred in. We have PVC debt payments in there and a whole host of things. And again, that detail is in your book. The rest of it is a little more straightforward. That typically runs $40 to $50 million a year. As you look around the rest of it, you can see just the size of these budgets. DTI is the largest, and they really, facilities is the next largest, then DTI. And then a lot of the other departments are quite a bit smaller. Risk management is our insurance, non-health insurance, so it's pretty significant. And you can see the size of the rest of the departments there. In terms of the overall scope, again, we're up the last 2 years because of the coronavirus relief funds, and typically this area is more around 100 to 122. The FTEs have gone up about 10 this year, and those are all detailed in various budgets. We mentioned two that went from TTV to FMA. That was kind of settling out from when the restructuring was, but the rest of them we'll go over in detail later. I'll turn it over to Gail.
I'll turn it over to Joe.
Sorry, Joe.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Joe Waters, Assistant County Manager. Just as a reminder, you'll probably recall from prior years that under the Leadership and Support Services piece of our review, we have the leadership from each of these departments present, but we'll do the presentation. I'll do a piece of it. Budget staff will help. If you have more detailed questions, the departments are here to help answer and respond to those.
Process question, Mr. Chair. Do you want them to go through all these and then have questions?
that'll be fine.
Okay.
That'll be fine.
Okay. Let's see then. First on the list, I'm sure there will be no questions about the Board of County Commissioners' metrics and key points.
That's why we said we should go through all of them.
Yes, I like that. The County Commissioners / audit organizational scorecard, you see before you, they are making good progress on their KPIs and generally positive trends and staying well within their targets. A couple of areas in yellow, but those are generally related to staffing and things like that that have been a challenge for the budget group, as it has for much of the organization. In spite of having lost 2 employees, being down 2 employees in 2021, they were able to make a lot of progress in spite of that through the course of the year. But that also is one of their challenges going forward. As they rebuild their staffing levels, they have to try to get people with audit experience, get them inculcated into the department. Those very same sorts of challenges that the organization is feeling in a lot of different places. And also, they have a challenge for them in going forward is remaining flexible, agile in doing their audit work. It is not a static business to be in. The audit group, the board's office, wait a minute, yep.
Yeah, Mark,
Mark's got it. Thank you.
Mark Zapp with Budget and Financial Planning. There was one request for additional resource that was recommended. This is for technology equipment replacement in this particular room, essentially non-computer equipment replacement. So this is related to microphones, encoders, cameras, podiums equipment, and other equipment that's needed for the BOCC meetings. That amounted in $30,000.
That was funded, right?
Correct, it is funded.
Thank you.
Moving on then to budget and financial planning. I would ask Scott to take over.
Brian Seidler.
Oh, Brian,
short
I'm sorry.
straw, and is going to do the budget pages.
Good move, Scott. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Brian Seidler with Budget and Financial Planning. With our, in terms of our performance measures, to just go briefly over these, our financial measures on the scorecard are doing pretty well. That has to do with keeping our AAA bond rating and keeping our expenditures within budget, and then as well as maintaining compliance with county financial policies. Excuse me. Our maximized citizen and customer satisfaction measure is shown in yellow. That has to do mainly with that we did not measure one of the ELT survey this year, and so the other measures are green, but we just didn't measure that one, so it's resulted in the yellow for that bubble. Managing innovation and budget initiatives is also showing yellow. That has to do with two of our targets being set to increase each year, and with those targets did not increase, but the other two measures are green. Organizational development and enhancing staff skills, that has to do with our staff being able to attend conferences. This one is rebounding from travel restrictions put in place by COVID. It was better than 2020 last year, but it is on pace to meet the target for this year as we get people out and about to conferences. And then the final one has to do with maintaining our staff satisfaction and engagement, has to do with the engagement survey. For key points are accomplishments. We were able to successfully partner with Wastewater, Gilmore Bell, and Baker Tilly to enter an agreement with EPA for $281.3 million. This has to do with the Nelson project. It represents 49% of the project, and we were able to obtain a 3.01 interest rate, which compared to current bond rates is going to save us a lot of money. We were also able to partner with the airport, Van Trust Real Estate, Gilmore Bell, Baker Tilly, for financing options for the New Century Commerce Center Phase 1 for $20.3 million. We were able to partner with the fire districts to create a new budget format, including updated performance measures, which I believe we will implement next year. Performance measure accomplishments, we were able to successfully transition all department agencies and offices to the new format this year. And we updated the dashboard to include a linkage to the board priorities and goals for each key performance indicator, and also put a future year target goal on the dashboard. For budget accomplishments, we created a new fee schedule to coincide with GFOA requirements, which is listed in the budget book. We provided an analysis on dark store theory, pilots, and some for the fire districts, and we continue to work with the state on revenue projections. For innovation, we continue to promote entrepreneurship, which is a practice of enabling employees to act as entrepreneurs while they work within an organization. And so we currently are doing new things with innovation, including looking at helping departments look at their data in new ways. Some of the challenges are increased workload and requests for analysis with fewer FTEs. We did lose a FTE last year in budget, and we're also currently down one in innovation. Limitations within the existing budget software, BMS, Workiva, continue to have some limitations within those software programs that help to create the budget. And the impact of rising interest rates on future bond issues is a challenge that we're looking at as those rates continue to rise. And budget had no request for additional resources, so that's all I have for them.
Okay, thank you.
So back to me then with the county manager's office. And I know I have people here that can help me speak to this if needed. Let's start with the organizational scorecard. I want to point out a couple of things here. We have a lot of blue in there because a number of our measures were not measured last year due to the pandemic. But we do have some new information. As you know, we received the survey material from ETC recently, and with very positive results. And if It is not our practice in this, in our model today with our dashboards, but 3 of these that are in blue would be yellow with the newest information we have, and 1 would be in red. Are providing resources for quality services, creating community of choice, and enhancing our communication with the community are all moved to green status based upon ETC findings. Just these recent findings. The one that stayed or went back to red was managing the organization effectively, again, based upon results from the ETC study. Moving on then to,
Chairman?
yes.
Yes.
So I brought up during the comment period that I would like us to pursue a proposal from staff regarding support services because of all the federal funding that's out right now, competitive grants, federal appropriations. Like I said, there's funding now for airports, bus replacement, cybersecurity, homeland security issued, broadband, to expand broadband to those 16,000 people in our county. So I'm asking for this commission that, that our staff could bring forward at a meeting, what would be the options to assist us in pursuing that federal funds. And we didn't have time during the comments. That's why I'm bringing it up now, if this commission would allow staff to bring a proposal back.
Well, that's fine. I would note that on the revisit list. And
But revisit won't be for another month. The revisit list. And I mean, it's tick-tock. Some of these are coming out in a month, 2 months, in time we get a proposal, in time we analyze that proposal, we're gonna miss like Homeland Security for cybersecurity funding. I guess I would like them to work on the proposal now.
well, what's that cost going to be at staff time and otherwise?
Mr. Terry, the staff is working on some broadband, and also I know the airport is working on, and we continue to work on funds. So I know some of that's already being done, but I can't tell you how much. I just know.
I don't have a problem examining that. We've looked at it in the past, and maybe, this time period is different than in the past, but anyway. Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Hvac, could you clarify what you're asking for?
Well, so like Water One, all these other entities have federal assistance with federal appropriations, with regulatory. You often talk about CDBG. So Water One, Johnson County Community College. So by having assistance at the federal level, you can access some of this. So you follow this through the process, and we would be able to get that, all the federal appropriations from the senators and congressional David's office was from entities that had federal representation and federal support.
Clarification. Then are you asking for us to hire a consultant, hire additional staff, reassign existing
It would be
staff?
consultant. It would be a consultant proposal.
Okay, so is that something that's conceptually, I think I'm tracking with you now, but is that something that I'm looking through you to staff, is that something that we currently have access to that we could readily act upon? Because if the timeline is as short as Commissioner Hvac says, trying to find someone new would be a challenge, even for the ultimate resource manager there known as Maury Thompson.
So thank you for that and the question, Commissioner.
It's the answer that you...
Yeah. So a couple of responses back to the chairman's reference. We've looked at this in the past. My recollection was it was 2017. The then board considered this, and we looked at it at that time. Cost estimates, if I recall at that time, were somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 to 120 annual cost. I know that's a wide variation. So I would anticipate probably still somewhere in that neighborhood. I believe what I hear Commissioner Fast suggesting is there are federal resources in terms of firms who provide this level of expertise to help with appropriations assistance through the federal structure, as well as regulatory assistance if needed. There are firms. So to your question about doing it quickly, actually I think you could do it relatively quickly and bring back a proposal for the board's consideration.
For all of these areas or specific?
Well,
Yeah, for all of these areas. There are firms who specialize in this.
The one right now, the bipartisan infrastructure, roads and bridges, I think is really key, and like broadband. I mean, and if we got one appropriation, it would more than pay for that.
Okay, Ms. Hanslick, you have a
Yes, thank you. No, I very much support what Commissioner Fast is proposing, that we ask the staff to go ahead and prepare some information and do some research on what would be the next steps to engage somebody in DC to represent us and make sure that we are taking advantage of all of these current and probably over the next couple of years, federal funding opportunities, because we've had the discussion that we don't have dedicated staff right now who can do that. And in fact, those folks that, who do this, they know exactly how to get this done. And I share the concern that we could be missing out on millions of dollars in federal assistance just because we don't have somebody there working it on our behalf. So I completely support that and would love to see what would be the next steps and how soon could we do that.
Well, if we were to move forward, there would be a 22 budget impact as well as a 23 budget impact. So that information needs to come back to us. My sense is the commission has no problem moving forward with investigating that. So noted.
What's the name of our firm that does the ARPA? I mean.
Witt O'Brien's.
Okay, so it'd be something like that.
Yeah. Mr. Ashcraft.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think you're getting at it because I think they're both short-term and long-term implications.
I just.
It's not a simple package, but it's a valid
I mean, to
observation.
me, it's really a window right now for the next year or two. I think there's going to be a lot of changes.
So noted.
But to channel Commissioner O'Hare, there will be questions about federal entanglements.
Understand.
There always is.
Okay, let's continue. Let's continue with the budget.
Yes, and moving to the manager's office accomplishments and service challenges, particularly in the context of a pandemic year, there have been a lot of accomplishments related to just the variety of changes in our workplace and our work practices, the potential for disruption in our business practices that were avoided and managed through. And in spite of all that, having really overwhelmingly satisfaction levels from our community survey. So we're very pleased with that. Of course, our AAA bond rating being maintained. The JOCO magazine, as well as Best Times, earning a number of top awards. Again, this year, just maintaining a very, very high standard. Under service challenges, the same workplace pressures that the whole organization is feeling, the manager's office has as well, in terms of our ability to attract and retain, as has been stated by others. The inflationary costs, we are certainly not immune from that in our office either. The postage costs and other things associated with the JOCO magazine and Best Times have really put us in a bind, and that is the reason why, on the next slide, there is a request that has been funded, included in the manager's budget, for an RAR for $50,000. It is primarily driven by increasing postage and printing costs for the magazine, as well as for Best Times.
Okay, all right. Next. Go ahead.
Is that all for the leadership?
No, there's 8 departments.
I'm sorry.
The next would be the legal department. And this is, as you can see from the legal department's scorecard, this is a work in progress. PEG has backed up and done really a whole rewrite and a whole new approach for the department, which is quite appropriate and in progress. So if we have questions of her, I'd rather her speak to those, but they seem well positioned to me to yield some good results over in the coming years, or good data. Key points related to the legal department, their accomplishments, this case management system that they've been installing, it's in process, I would say. It's largely in place, now being populated with all the information from the work that they do, yielding a lot of good information to help manage and help track the work as it moves through the department, and that has a collateral benefit for the whole organization that they provide support to. They, similar to the rest of the workforce challenges, they've having turnover and anticipate more as time goes on. So they will have the very same challenges there as others. When it comes to changes in their budget, there are 3 funded RARs. One is for a legal intern. This is a part-time, there's two positions, part-time are part of a replacement and succession planning strategy. And it's well thought out, sort of a plan that I think will provide great benefit to the department as it transitions in the coming years. Software maintenance related to that Hvac software. That's the system that I mentioned earlier that is installed now and being fully loaded up. And then a legal assistant, this is a new position. This will is really in response to the increases in Kansas Open Records Act, CORA requests. It is not just the increase in the volume of CORA requests, it's the complexity. And this has taken an extraordinary amount of time in the legal department, as well as others. This is a legal assistant position that could help streamline our responses, streamline the work process of gathering the information necessary to respond to these core requests in a timely and appropriate manner.
Okay.
There's a hand coming up over here. If you would.
I thought we were going to wait till we completed this. So go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Make a note.
Make a note, yes. The next is the Department of Technology and Innovation. The scorecard for DTI reflects a whole lot of green. DTI is a department that uses a whole lot of measures and key performance indicators. They pull down from those that they think are most pertinent to try to populate responses in these 4 basic areas of financial, customer relations, operational effectiveness, and employee engagement. These are the ones that they have selected. They've not had any changes of significance in the KPIs that they are utilizing this year. They do move the targets as needed. If they are hitting them too regularly, they'll probably bump it up, make it a little more aspirational. There are several areas that are in green and solid, the majority, a few yellow areas. One that is of note is the average call wait time that you see there. Their objective is to be at under 18 seconds. They are averaging 21 seconds, in 2021. So we'll see where they come in 18. So they're not far off, but we'll see how they do. The Workstation Standardization, I know this is something that the board had a great deal of interest in several years ago and directed staff to move down that path. And there's good progress, but their objective is to reach 90% standardization. They are not quite there. They've gone from 59% to 72% over the prior 3-year period, moving towards that 90. But it might looks on that pace, it may take a couple more years. But it's a very good aspirational, in my opinion. I'll run through the accomplishments, and then I'll ask Budget to review the funded RARs and CIPs and that sort of thing. Under accomplishments, there's a long list there, nice list there. I won't run through all of it, but you can read it. Some of the key things that they've worked, the hybrid remote work support, that's for county commissioners, planning commissioners, and staff across the whole organization. And Tom underscored this, and I will do the same. The website implementation this past year under DTI's guidance has been a significant accomplishment and a significant success. Cybersecurity is an ongoing challenge, of course. They've done very well in this past year. And it is an area that, as you see under service challenges, is also a challenge going forward to stay aggressive and stay on top of it. Employee retention and other associated resource constraints, again, similar to others in the organization. And Bill would kick me if I did not point out an accomplishment of avoiding over $274,000 in expenses through effective utilization of the tools we have and negotiation on the costs thereof. Mark.
Mark Zapp with Budget and Financial Planning. There are 7 funded requests for additional resources for DTI. We'll go through them each briefly. The first is an IT security program position. This is essentially to enhance the security team, to improve vulnerability and prevention analysis, along with risk management. There's $150,000 that is funded for offsite backup storage. Essentially, this is moving from the tape-based system of backup storage into a cloud provider, and we'll move to an annual subscription model. There's also $350,000 for multi-factor authentication management. In essence, this is expansion of the MFA protocols that we use to increase user experience and to meet additional requirements. There's an additional $180,000 for cybersecurity tools. This is to increase the tools in our arsenal to be able to increase our cybersecurity posture and increase security related to those threats. There's also $205,000 for IT service management tool expansion. In essence, this would allow us to plan, implement, and measure and better demonstrate compliance with measurement improvement for service management delivery. There's also $55,000 for vendor access. This is related to expanded security for those third-party consultants who are able to access the county systems, provide some greater restraints and monitoring related to their access to the system. And then finally, $100,000 on a one-time basis for the Oracle EBS renewal, which would allow for the Oracle EBS application to continue through 2023. There are 2 unfunded RARs. The first is the desktop engineering team, which was not recommended to be funding, and the second was for the audio-visual team, which also was not recommended to be funded. There are 3 capital improvement projects. The first is infrastructure maintenance for roughly $831,000. This is a regular kind of ongoing annual CIP project from the Department of Technology and Information Services and allows us to upgrade both the infrastructure and the services that we provide related to the IT services. Fiber expansion and maintenance, again, a regular and ongoing CIP project in the same amount of $200,000 as what's been funded in prior years. And this allows for expansion of the fiber county network as we partner with other public entities. Finally, new this year is $250,000 for the voice system strategies and migration. This is somewhat of a change from the prior year CIPs that you've probably seen for phone replacement. This is an enhancement and kind of a reevaluation on how we provide our phone services and looking to move away from just those hard set phones and utilize other technology that the county is currently using.
Before we move entirely off of DTI, I do want to draw a little attention to the unfunded RAR, the audiovisual team. While that was not included in the manager's budget, we've had a lot of conversation around this. As we determine what the new normal is going to be for how we hold our public meetings and how much we have staff and other business being done remotely, we may be back next year talking about this again. The complexity of hybrid public meetings such as this with Zoom and YouTube and our on-base systems, these things take skills that we cover with very high-paid staff today. We could be more efficient there if this is what the future holds. So that it was not funded this year, but you may hear from us next year on that one as well. The next is the Justice Information Management Systems. This is a division now after the of DTI after the merger. So it may look a little different in the presentation next year for this year. It shows as an independent group with the organizational scorecard, as you can see. They are in red under improving resource forecasting. This is an area that has been a little volatile for them, and they're trying to get that to settle in after the move into the new courthouse and other expenses associated with that. The customer satisfaction continues strong if you look at their KPIs, and quite positive. And then the staff engagement and retention, they're again working with their staff engagement rate is something that they try to measure internally as well as using the county's overall survey. And they also include staff turnover rate in their in the determination of that particular scorecard item, and that has been pretty high for them, fluctuating but pretty high for them over the last 3 years. So accomplishments for this group, they have been instrumental in installing this new upgraded security camera system countywide that the board approved earlier this year. They've also done a major systems upgrade of the niche system and the GEMS case management system. And they continue, which will be going on for several years more, I'm sure, the integration with the Tyler project associated with the statewide courts application. The next.
Marked up with BFP. Again, there are two funded RARs for GEMS. The first is a System Administrator 2 position. In essence, this is based off of workload. There's currently a ratio of about 80 servers to each one FTE at the GEMS system. The second is Maintenance Support, which is traditionally the subscription and maintenance models for services that are provided. I will note that it also includes the virtual desktops that are going to be implemented this year, but really it is to ensure that these systems are accessible and secure 24/7. Finally, there is one recommended capital improvement project for $557,000 for infrastructure maintenance. This is the hardware that you would associate with the IT servers, blades, Cradlepoint APS, and again, those virtual desktop implementation systems, a CIP that has been requested in prior years in roughly the same amount.
All right, I'm going to suggest we stop there. I know there are some questions. I don't want to forget all of them. Ms. Allenbrand, you had a question on another area.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought I was being reprimanded.
Pardon?
I want to go back to legal. I'm concerned that the core reports that are being submitted, if that's even going to be enough. I mean, the dollars that are being spent and the time being spent right now on all the reports are very much excessive when the information is already out there. But if we get that report, I guess we do have to then submit it. So I just know that when I'm asking something, how much of that is being going on by the staff. And it's not just legal, I mean, it's other county staff as well. So that was you're giving me that look.
Well, no, people don't often say, why didn't you ask for more? So that's that look.
Well, can
But I do appreciate the concern.
I will say that we have talked about that as a staff, and I think others have mentioned it's not just legal that's dealing with informational requests that have increased in complexity and types and time on it. So with this one, I think this is more an emergent, more of an immediate need. So we will likely be asking it for this year, and then it will impact the 23 year, but I don't think we can wait till January 1st on this one. And we need to monitor it because I'm not sure it's enough either.
Mr. Ashcraft?
Are you done?
No, but that's.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just, and I also want to thank Ms. Trent because I know she's been looking at, I've been several different appointments on boards and commissions, taking a look at our statutes and taking a look at, do we have training? And I know that she's been doing that as well, which has taken a lot of time. But I just wanted to thank you for that.
Mr. Ashcraft?
Okay.
I'm done.
Thank you. I have a number of comments, but I'll just limit my comment to piggyback on yours. I want to thank Ms. Trent. She has taken the initiative, somewhat like the Elections Commissioner has, and attempted to develop a framework that identifies meaningful metrics for the legal department, which is for us unusual, from my perspective, long overdue. So I commend you for that and am very supportive of it. The perspective, though, is I have hesitancy about adding additional personnel because we don't have those metrics, and until I can see some indication that we are fully and efficiently using existing staff, adding additional staff gives me pause. So I would look forward to learning more about how you've established that metric. I don't doubt that you have more core requests. They are more challenging, but long-term to add personnel, I'm not quite there yet. So, we can do that offline because the hour is growing late.
Yeah. I would just say this, I'm fully supportive of the addition of the personnel to the legal department. My observation, the volume of work, especially on Cora, just seems to increase every day, and we're in a position where we need to be able to respond to that. So I think it's entirely appropriate, and I would be supportive of that. Ms. Hansley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with you. I would be very supportive of this on a number of levels. First of all, I think the legal department is being called upon to provide more and more time to the Board of County Commissioners as we deal with some very complicated issues. And speaking for myself, I don't want to not be able to get the information I need to make good decisions. That would be a disservice to our citizens. But also, I anticipate this is going to be an ongoing situation, really no matter who is sitting in these chairs because of the complexity of a lot of the issues that we're dealing with. So I agree with you. We need this.
Okay. Questions on any of the items that have been discussed so far? Mr. Ashcraft?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, a couple of observations and questions. I would like to commend Mr. Nixon on the DTI metrics. there's a level of sophistication there that I very much appreciate. I would be interested, though, in some of those staffing requests, both those that were funded and not funded, in terms of the ROI. I know you are attuned to that. The documentation I've seen doesn't really make clear. I know staff has worked through that, but I'd like to have some understanding for both those that were funded and unfunded, if you could. And I'd also be interested in how your requests, the RARs, both funded and unfunded, will impact your overall metrics. I think your services are solid and improving, and I also know you have an environmental challenge from hackers and the world beyond us that others of us do not have, and I want to make sure that we're addressing that fully. And I'm sure that's been filtered, but I'd like to understand that. And along those lines, related to gyms, and I guess that's your issue now, is that correct? You're smiling, so I'm taking that as yes. I very much like the metric for the budget being 10% under the budget. I thought that was a very interesting point, so I'm supportive of that. But the FTE that is added for, I think it's administrator, given the original discussion from the matrix report a number of years ago, I thought we had certain efficiencies that we would be seeing, and I'm just wondering how that works out, because we're adding a position, and we can discuss this offline to expedite the remainder of this meeting.
Yeah. Well, again, there is a revisit list that's available.
Correct.
Mr. Nixon, maybe I'm going to ask this question. I know the Kansas court system is working with a new, or trying to implement a new system. How does that impact your operation and gyms? Because I think we need to be aware of that.
Bill Nixon, Department of Technology and Innovation. There are some court resources that are in the GEMS budget today that would transition over into the state's budget. And I know we had put in some requests related to that. Given the timeline of where we are with the court transition, it doesn't need to happen for next year, given where we think the timing is. But there is going to need to be a discussion about what state resources will be used to support GEMS versus the state system.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions on the items? Ms. Fast.
Yes, I mean, right now we have our higher level legal attorneys doing CORAs. To me, it's a cost efficiency too. That's a function that could be done by legal assistants, supported like legal interns. So I understand about adding, but still the cost efficiency here, they should be doing, I think this is a proper proposal that can be a function done more cost effectively.
Okay, thank you. All right, continue.
Great. The Facilities Department, the department has a series of yellow bubbles here on our organizational scorecard. I will start off with, there's not been any changes in the KPIs that this department is utilizing. They do change their targets of year to year, depending upon a variety of factors, and those are all described. They use, on an ongoing basis, they are using about 60 KPIs to manage your operation, working on another 5. Overall, there is significant positive progress in a number of areas, and they're solidly in the green. But there are a few that they're working against in the fleet area, for instance, where we have parts and fuel prices that have gone up. We monitor our costs per mile, and when the costs go up, the math is pretty simple. Your numbers aren't going to be where you'd like them to be. So There is another establishing the average business days to complete maintenance work requests is another area that was in the red this time around. That is as much a data challenge or cleanup process that they've been going through to clean up the database on old work orders, maybe weren't closed out quite right, or those that weren't being attended to. So this is an important metric that is a work in progress. By and large, the staff turnover, I will point that one out as well. This is a department that has, over the last 2 years, had a pretty darn high turnover rate, 13.9% in 2020, 18.3% in 21. Their target is 10. They're keeping it at 10 because that's where we believe they need to be. That's the right balance, the sweet spot. That is about where they have been prior to the pandemic. So feel like things are going well here in this first 4 months of the year. They're on a pace to be at about 12 to maybe 13, but maybe even better than that. So I will say in my time as the interim facilities director, that other hat that I wear, the department has an exhaustive list of KPIs, and they use them regularly in the management of their operations. And I think, and of course, people are here, Nicole's here to answer any questions you might have about that. When it comes to the key points, you all are well aware of some of their most important, the Strategic Facilities Master Plan for the next 20 years, getting completed this year, or 15 years, I'm sorry, getting completed just at the tail end of last year, first of this year. They're in the process now of a needs assessment update that they do every 1 to 5 years, and they are, of course, working with departments on the extent of the modifications to the workplace for those that are working more remote and the services being provided differently. Service challenges are, for this department as well as some of our other infrastructure-related departments, significant construction cost increases, materials and supply shortages that don't just cost more, but they drag out activities that are on schedules that become important. So there's disruptions as well as additional costs. Those are pretty significant challenges. And then you overlay the difficulty that they're having hiring, retaining, as I mentioned, improving, but not quite where we want to be yet. Some of the other key points, a number of property acquisitions you're well aware of. You can see them there. A number of key projects made a lot of progress on, some in process, some completed here in the last year. A focus on energy management and developing an energy reduction plan organization-wide that is underway. It's very exciting. And additional services with warehouse work and surplus work for the libraries, as well as improvement of our warehousing operations. And lastly, a note that, once again, I'm not sure how many years this is, maybe 3 years, maybe 4, that fleet has been recognized as a top 100 notable fleet programs across the nation. With that, let's see. That's Gail, yeah. Why am I looking over there?
They have one request for additional resource, and that is the building maintenance operating for $216,499, and that's basically from the MEDAC being facilities, buildings and such being transitioned over to facilities. So this will cover the cost of the maintenance, custodial, and the grounds. They do have, as normal, several CIPs. The funded CIPs are the annual CRP for 4.9, almost 5 million, which is to be funded with ad valorem. The major asset replacement projects at close to 1.6 million funded with general fund reserves, better known as MARP. The new human services building at 350,000, that's the study money. The total project is estimated at $83.75 million. With the project will be PBC debt. This $350,000 we're using public health reserves, and that's to do programmatic needs assessment, efficiency study, and budgetary cost estimates. It's this current proposal, and with the 83.75, is proposes to consolidate both the Olathe Mental Health and the Human Services building into one facility to replace two existing buildings. The next one is the ADA compliance project, $817,000 with general fund reserves. The next one is the Crime Lab HVAC project for $849,000. I believe on more than one occasion, maybe that you discussed that with the board already. That's to do with the procedures to perform the work associated with advanced, to have advanced introducing new chemicals requiring modifications to the HVAC system. And so they need to upgrade the exhaust. The energy efficiency measures project at $1.154 million. Again, that's general fund reserves, as was the Crime Lab HVAC. And this is not unusual for an annual project on the energy efficiencies, and I do believe they do ROIs on all of the projects that go forward out of this. There's $3.1 million of general fund reserves for a fleet maintenance building expansion. It's to align with current and projected growth, especially with taking over the MedAct, the ambulances. The next one is the MedAct new Olathe facility at $9.9 million. We're going to debt finance that. It's the construction of a new freestanding MedAct station in the west central part of Johnson County. MedAct 34 improvements at $720,000 with general fund reserved. If you recall, we purchased that building in September of 2020. We renovated it for $350,000. Now this is to deal with some programmatic changes that are necessary, dealing with the Fair Labor Work Standards, bunk room changes, restroom facility changes, and such. The next one is the mental health TRP building program modifications. This is the CSS recovery place, $992,000 is to renovate the, and that'll be used with mental health fund reserves. Renovate the basement to support programmatic needs and add an elevator for the accessibility to fully leverage the usable space. And then there are two unfunded CIPs. The nutrition kitchen, program kitchen, this is study money at $28,000. Currently the project is not in the 5-year CIP. And the other unfunded is the New Century Data Lab renovation at $7.7 million. And it's currently not in the 5-year CIP either.
Moving on then to financial management. Looking first to their scorecard, a number of greens, very positive the results from the KPIs, but not quite across the board, which is perfectly fine, of course. They have, let me see here, they're enhancing their customer satisfaction. The Archives Records Management Satisfaction Survey is in yellow. Their target is 90%. They're at 88%. This is a measure that they've not been able to, or a KPI that they've not been able to measure for several years, but they have some new information there. The wellness area is in red. That is because it is at 68.7% when their target is 77%. So needing have slipped a little bit relative to pre-pandemic numbers, and so needing to get back on the bike there and try to improve our wellness participation. 77% is a very aggressive target, but very worthwhile if we can make it there. The key points and accomplishments. In the last year or so, the department has taken on the grant management responsibilities. there was a position that was in CMO, that's moved over to FMA. They have expanded their clerical assistance. They are now providing support to 11 different county departments, agencies, as well as Parks and Recreation and Fire District Number 2. The next, under accomplishments, there's a number of things listed there. It's like all things associated with CRF and now with the state and local fiscal recovery, the SLFRF funds. FMA has been very involved in the, not just the receiving and the proper accounting of these dollars, but participating in interactions with the federal government, with the Treasury, to seek clarity, provide input from a local government on maybe how things should be done. They've been very proactive and have done a fantastic job of managing that, and that's been a lot of work. The next slide, there's a number of accomplishments there as well. Just pointing out that the Fire District 2 transition, know that the fire districts and Mr. Thompson and others have been very involved, but behind the scenes, these things, things like that, things like the merger with MedAct and Emergency Communications to become the Department of Emergency Services. The FMA is instrumental in finding ways to make those things happen for the betterment of the organization and the community. Service challenges are really it's staff resources stretched thin in the purchasing and their accounting divisions. So the risk management key points, it's a division, of course, of FMA. They've beefed up their training and education in a number of different ways, and it has helped to reduce by 19% our total net incurred expenses, or 36% for FY21 compared to FY20. So a lot of success there. There are challenges in this area: market volatility, cybersecurity, law enforcement, all of those kinds of coverage that we review each year and have seen those get more and more difficult to take on. Rising medical costs as well. And then property liability claims payouts here recently have adversely impacted their financial numbers there. Moving on then to human resources. Their KPIs are unchanged from last year. They've been holding their own or making progress in a number of green areas that we're very pleased about. A few that they're trying to make additional progress on that are in yellow, related to complying with legal and policy requirements. We're at 99.5. We want to be at 100, for instance. And then we have a couple of areas in red that are really related to engagement and department engagement that had slipped here as a result, almost certainly, of pandemic and open positions and that sort of thing in the department that have and they have had a significant burden on their department with an extraordinary amount of work here in the last few years. And jumping then to their accomplishments, they've updated their careers site layout, which is, they're very focused, as you can see on these accomplishments, about attracting and retraining, recruiting, internal recruitment roundtables to figure out what's the best way for us to reach different candidates than we have, getting creative ideas. And we're utilizing 3 new recruiting platforms. You can see Indeed, LinkedIn, and Circa. They aren't cheap, but they are effective, and they are the place where a lot of people are finding jobs these days. So, and that's where they're looking, and so we are out there actively working those areas. Service challenges, attracting and retaining diverse and qualified workforce, of course. That's what their overall county had on. They're having the same challenges within their own department with a number of vacancies. We've been working hard to try to help them fill. The applicant tracking system, I would draw your attention to that as well. That may be an area that you hear complaints occasionally. Our system is old. We are bound and determined to get it replaced this year, but that takes a lot of staff time in their office. So we can help them from a staff perspective as well as help our applicants. So that's an exciting project here in the next 6 months we want to get done. Human Resources proposed changes.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. Human Resources has 3 funded RARs. The first one is going to be the Human Resources Recruitment Specialist, $85,000 about. That is to assist with those areas countywide that Joe discussed with, as we know, the recruitment challenges. And then they have $9,000 for interpretation and translation services. This is so that documents and training materials can be translated for employees that would benefit. And then they have an incident management system for $13,771 to track investigations, hotline reports, and corrective actions in one place.
I would add just one thing on the Human Resources Recruitment Specialist. There is a person doing that work today from a loaned position that came over from corrections to help Human Resources attack this significant problem of recruiting in this market. But they need that position back in corrections. So this won't actually add to their current workforce, but it will allow us to hold that position and do that important work going forward. So with that, any questions on these remaining departments that we just covered?
Well, let me ask you this, and I don't want to spend a lot of time today. I hope we can talk about it maybe at the next meeting, but the facilities CIP. I noticed there was money there for a roof on the northeast courthouse. Is that right? I thought we just spent $4 or $5 million about 3 or 4 years ago replacing that roof. Or am I mistaken?
We'll get you that answer.
Pardon?
We'll get you that answer. I don't.
Yeah, my question is, if we spent that money replacing the roof, why are we replacing part of it again in such short order?
What roof are you talking about?
Northeast
I thought there was a item in there for replacement of the northeast.
It's a partial.
Am I misreading that?
It's a partial roof replacement.
Partial roof replacement, but I thought we replaced the entire roof several years ago to the tune of $4 or $5 million.
I'll find out.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
Then there's also an amount of money for the lab.
Right.
There, the building next to the 400,000 square foot office. I guess if we're ever going to be in a position to lease that property, this lab is contiguous to that office building. And I was in discussion the other day about a data center. And so I think we need to understand the function of that lab building in relation to the current larger building, and whether or not we would do ourselves a disfavor by taking that out of circulation for the entire property. The other question I have about where is the public health building, mental health building, and Evergreen Living?
That was touched on. Let me see which slide that was.
There's $350,000 in there to study it.
Pardon?
There's $350,000 currently in the proposed budget for the new Human Services building. Is that what you're talking about? Slide 40. And it's related to an 83.75 total project. But I think the study dollars will give them more information.
Right. And you'll recall, of course, Chairman and Commissioners, that the project that we're proposing moving forward with here is essentially the project that was originally approved in 2020, and then paused when New Century Office Building came into the county's ownership, and we went down the assessment
We can
path.
talk about that offline, but I need to get a better grasp of timing on those projects.
Okay. Okay.
Ms. Fast?
Yeah, can you talk about the mental health building program modifications? What building is that? What basement? So forth.
That, I'm going to use the wrong term, but that's the adult detox center, the lower level of the facility.
The recovery center where
Recovery center.
the garden is, that building?
Yes, it's the lower level there that was never finished out. It was
So
unfinished.
they have groups there now,
Yes, they do.
but there's no elevator going down there?
Not today, no.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah, that is space that could be used better.
And needs to have these things done so it can be used in such a manner. How's that?
Okay, other questions, Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several incidental questions. On slide 40, talked about ADA compliance, about 800 grand and change. The way it's worded, I just need some clarification we can discuss offline, because my recollection was back, the 1990s law had indicated that only when you did updates did you have to be in compliance with ADA. But I know the law has evolved since then, so I just need a little education on that.
That works very well if you're in private sector. In government, that you don't get much leeway, a few years.
You can give me some education offline if you would. Next, under risk management, I see that what appears to be the metrics under financial management administration, but the target for medical claims cost per employee, you increased it by over $1,000, and I just would be interested in what caused the increase, because what came to mind was a few years ago, a former commissioner, Commissioner Klicka, had talked about creating some kind of insurance stabilization fund to help mitigate spikes and valleys. And I was just wondering if that is something that we have had any further discussion on or consideration of, because at the time we were talking about it conceptually being a good idea, but something that we'd have to build. And I just didn't see anything. And maybe that's no longer an issue, but I'd like to get your perspective on that. Okay. And then finally, slide 49, two of those items are incidental, and I'm just wondering, can't $9,000 and $14,000 be found in existing funds somewhere rather than having new ARs? I'm always curious about that, and then I'd like to learn more about the current arrangement for the HR recruitment specialists. You indicated you're using someone from corrections. If that is, why that's not working and why we need an additional position. So, and we can discuss that offline.
Okay.
I want to make a comment. The last couple of meetings, we've had good presentations from representatives of Good Faith Network in regards to Crisis Intervention Center. And I think we've informed the public that that's on our 5-year CIP. I do think it's important to analyze and make sound judgments going forward. I know many times what's going on in Douglas County is brought up, and my information is that Douglas County initiated, voters approved a sales tax to accomplish the funding of that facility. And so I think Mike Bauer can confirm that or tell me if I'm wrong. as well as, it is a relatively small facility. Our population is about 4.5 or 5 times larger than Douglas County, and the operating expenses for that smaller facility is about $5 or $6 million a year, which is to come out of that sales tax. So there are a lot of factors to look at, analyze, and consider before moving forward. I'm not sure that we have any ability at all. We don't have any sales tax left that we could present to the voters, even if there was a desire to do so. So there are limitations, and I just wanted to mention that it's on our 5-year plan, but we need to do the analytical work before we make firm decisions.
Joe, so what is, we've all had questions. So what's in our 5-year plan for the crisis stabilization is bricks and mortar? That's not program, right? Can you explain what's in our, I see the numbers, but where did you get those numbers? What is that for?
The numbers that were submitted for 3 to 4 years out were bricks and mortar, not operations, but bricks and mortar that came out of the Strategic Facilities Master Plan work that we reviewed with you all last summer and fall. And that was identifying a best practice that our consultants and our departments have seen elsewhere, and recognizing that this could be a gap that would be beneficial for the community to fill somehow. But we did not get into any specific level of detail about who would run it, who should pay for it, understanding that there's a lot of work to do on this one, and I think that's why it showed up 3 to 4 years out, because it needs to be developed and thought through to work through all those complex details.
And Joe, I do want to add that it was in the requested CIP that was presented by Mark Dapp before the budget presentation. You may recall we had to meet certain deadlines. So it was listed there as a request, but it's not funded in, you may recall in the overview, we put it on the unfunded list saying potential partnerships. And so it's not included in the plan in my recommended budget as funded. We noted as an emerging need that partnerships needs to be studied with partnerships.
I don't know if people remember a number when David Wiebe, that's years ago, but not that, it feels yesterday to me, but Johnson County Mental Health had a crisis stabilization component in KU Medical Center in the ER, and we didn't have the funding to keep that going. And so that was a joint partnership with KU Med. So I think we're a long ways to go because that, KU Med, but even with that partnership, we weren't able to keep that going. That's probably 15 years ago. It's been a while.
Yeah, that partnership now exists in Wyandotte County. Right. So, this type of facility, it's operationally, it's 24/7. Takes a significant number of staff and probably need to, the full range of services that need to be offered include public safety, as well as mental health. So there may be homeless issues involved. It is an expensive operation, which, we need to make that judgment, but we need to have the information and the data. So, Mr. Neufeld, are you scratching your nose?
Yeah.
No, I suddenly had an itch. I apologize.
Okay, all right. Ms. Hanslick.
Yes, not to belabor it, but what's frustrating to me is that to me, this is a state responsibility to provide these residential services, and now it's come down to us, and we don't have the funds for it. And that, I think the state, the state should be held accountable to helping solve this issue. I've said before, I started my social work career in Kansas. When I moved to Kansas, I was a social worker at Topeka State Hospital, and those hospitals don't exist anymore.
I have one last question. So the nutrition, it was for like last year, 3 million, and now we've gotten on to 17 million. I don't get, like, how did we get to 17 million from 3 million?
I think
Can't find
that
it in here, but it's
I
in here.
believe the study, it's a range of 7 to 17.
It says 17 in here.
It does, but it's a range depending upon the solution. Which we generally find it best to, maybe shouldn't admit this, but you put the low number out there, that's what everyone will remember. We're not sure what the best solution will be. First thing we'll look at is the new health services building. Is that a good fit? Would that be the place to put it? And then you can put a good firm cost together if you know where it's going to go or what project it might be able to be bolted up with.
I would also add that this is yet another one that was requested but not funded. So it's on the list of potential needs that you could fund, but it's not included in the 5-year plan as funded. It's listed as a potential need in that range. There was initial request, I think, from the Area Agency on Aging or that department, but I don't know if that was really fleshed out. And then as we're starting to learn more about the options, there's quite a bit of different options if you choose to fund it.
Like the Motel 6 or the Hilton, huh? Whichever version you want to go.
Okay, any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much for hanging in there late in the day. We will, next week, we'll have a cold agenda. So I would encourage commissioners to examine that closely, look at the briefing sheets, and then we will continue our budget considerations also.
And Chairman?
Yes. Mr. Neufeld.
We would like very much if everybody would do their revisit list before they leave, and Gail will collect them.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you very much. We are adjourned. Have a nice weekend, and
Thank you, everyone.
hopefully
Thank
the
you,
sun
Mr. Chair.
shines.
Scott, I got a quick question for you.